So, well, my name is Rohan. Yeah. I grew up in Borivali. You all saw the film, no, yesterday? So, you all know about my history. So, we can do this through multiple ways. We can either you all can ask me questions and we can have a chat about what anything you thought about concerning the film, concerning anything. Or what I can do, I can make a short sort of general summary and then we can have a conversation. What would you guys prefer? General summary first. So this is lovely villa. That poster has this subtext down there that says architecture as autobiography. Yeah, which was important to me. I was thinking about that for a while. What is the relationship of architecture to the writing of my life or writing of anyone's life? Does architecture a stage within which we write our lives? But also when I tell you my story, I'm making it into a shape when I tell it to you. Actually, many things have happened in my life. When I'm telling it to you, even the act of telling is making it into an architecture, a form, a shape, a story. Yeah? So the film was interested in that relationship between architecture, which is form, meaning making, and life. So in that sense, the film, although it is about architecture as a idea of meaning making, not only architecture as building making. Yeah? So I'll explain that to you the further we go, and maybe parts of the film will become clearer to you when I say that. Yeah? So this was just a kind of thing that I'm curious about, this relationship between these two words. Huh? One is the idea of home and the other is that of identity. और क्या होता है कि when we speak of homes, we often speak of them as if there's a very clear identification between me and my home. I am my home is me. This is often the way that we speak of homes. And I'm not very comfortable with that. I'll explain why also. And the film was also interested in that tension between these two words. कि मैं मेरा घर नहीं हूं और ये घर मेरा नहीं है और ये घर what the घर wants me to be मैं नहीं हो सकता. ऐसे आपके घर में भी होता होगा, especially for women this is very often the case, is that the home as an idea imagines that the girl has to be a certain kind of person, demure, well behaved, will do the cooking in the house, will do the cleaning in the house, right? That's the way the home is imagined, ideal home. But the girl herself might be like, screw it, I like rock music and I want to wear black gothic clothes and have tattoos. That's how I am, right? So the tension between the identity that she has and what the home wants her to be don't fit. So I was also interested in that दोनों के बीच का जो tension है ना दोनों के बीच में, that is really what I'm interested in both my films. In both my films. Nostalgia for the Future, which you guys haven't seen, it's 1 hour long, and Lovely Villa. These are the two films I've made that concern housing. Yeah. We made Nostalgia for the Future in 2017 and we made Lovely Villa in 2019, 1 year just before the pandemic. Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about Nostalgia for the Future first and then we can talk a little bit more. Now, in Nostalgia for the Future, it's a very strange title. A nostalgia that you have for something that has not yet happened. So that title also was an important one for us. So I'll explain where the project was coming from. So I was born in 1971. And in 1989, 1990, everything changed around me. I was born when I was in school and I was, little younger than you is when everything changed. There was only 1 or 2 television channels. We had this idea that we are a socialist country. So we are all working together to help each other. We are one large community of people. We believe in freedom, equality and justice for all. That was the world that I thought we were growing up into that country. That is the idea of a country that we wanted to be part of. And everything that we did was towards the making of that society. And in 1990s, what happened? The floodgates opened up. And suddenly now they were like, all these channels on television, suddenly I was Coca-Cola on the streets. I was like, hey, what? Everything changed around me. And the idea of who we were meant to be as a society also changed. We were meant to be places that we consume things. Good capitalist consumers. Yeah. So, and the country became such that that became a value system. The more you consume, the more valuable you are. We continue to be in that sort of world right now. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. So that, जो दोनों का जो anxiety था ना, ये change हुआ है मेरे में. मेरे पुराने value systems और नए value systems का जो gap था, that became like some, and 20 years I was in that, so 2017. So my life was split between these two ideas of India. One, an idea of socialist India, and the other one idea of a consumerist capitalist India. And I was thinking as to how do you as an architect then imagine what your value systems are when you're designing something. Because all architects are participating in the making of better societies. And in my head, the better society had changed. In the 1970s and 80s, we had that idea that in the future we are going to be free, equal. That was the idea. And the film Nostalgia for the Future was that. It was a nostalgia for the future that we never got. A future that we had imagined once we would have. Yeah? Because in 2017, we realized, Mukul and I, my partner, that some dramatic changes had happened. And we were trying to figure out what that would be. Now, I am, of course, trained as an architect. But Mukul, my partner, is trained as a filmmaker. Yeah? And while I was really concerned about what is the future, what should architecture be doing within architecture, and what should architecture be doing at all for society, Mukul was asking the same questions for cinema. He was saying, what at that time cinema had a role to play, and very clearly had a role to play in the way that it participated in making a better society. You know, we had organizations like Films Division, etc., that used to do these films to better society. And that entire mandate by film had disappeared. So Nostalgia for the Future, the film, emerged out of that question concerning what should architecture be doing now, what should film be doing now. Yeah? And that's where this idea came up to say that we are interested in exploring the relationship between citizenship, who we are as citizens. All of us have citizens of India, no? We're all supposed to be free, equal, etc., etc. Yeah? And how is architecture imagined as participating in making that society? And film, in his case. Yeah. Now, I won't talk too much about that film because you all haven't seen it. But in that film, what we do is that we think about that. Think about that question of modernism. What is modernism? Modernism is the making of a new world where we could all be free, equal. That's all in the damn preamble of the Constitution. But this idea of modern, we wanted to see how architecture, through its modern architecture, there's a whole period of modernism now, how it participated in making that new citizen. When we design a house, I spoke about this earlier as well, we are not designing for who we are, we are designing for who we want to become. Right? And if architecture was going to be made for who the Indian citizen was going to become, what was the Indian citizen imagined as? That is the question that Nostalgia for the Future asks. So we look at 4 different homes built across 100 years. And in each of those houses, we ask that simple question. Is ghar mein who was supposed to be? What was the idea of the Indian that was embedded in this home? So the first one we look at is it's called Lakshmi Vilas Palace in Baroda, which is Maharaja built. And over there he puts together this home for a citizen of the world who takes something from Banaras, something from London, something from, and amalgamates it together. It's as if it's a collage that this new Indian citizen is going to make around her body to become this Indian. Right? Collage into modernity. The next house we look at is Le Corbusier's Shodhan Villa in Ahmedabad. Yeah. Over there, we were thinking about Nehruvian modernism and thinking about how in Nehruvian modernism it was imagined that we need to leave all caste, religion, everything aside and all need to be one with nature. Yeah. So that's the second home we look at. The third home we look at is Gandhi Ashram, where even the body we discard and becomes pure spirit. And the fourth home we look at is public housing projects done in Delhi, where all citizens are meant to be little machines. You're not a name, you're not anything, you're a number. 2 BHK, 3 BHK, kaun sa class mein hai, to class A, class B, class C employees, right? And the whole plan, everything is based on the logic of the machine. So you look at these 4 different ideas of modernism and 4 different architecture projects that were involved in making that modern citizen. Yeah. So that was in 2017. We made the film. The film was like, I was amazed. That film suddenly, because a very weird topic, like very dense, and I thought like, humne bana di, khush ho gaya. But it turned out that the film started doing well, and for me. Suddenly it was taking me to all kinds of places around the world. It took me to every fancy university in America. It was shown at a place in the Netherlands, the Delft, University of Delft. And I go to the University of Delft. My film is being shown inside. I take some time, I'm walking in the corridors. And as I'm walking in the corridors, I happen to come into an exhibition of the work of Charles Correa. And in that exhibition, there is a photo this big of mere ghar ka living room, interior. So I was like, yaar, ye kya hai? Right? And then I realized that actually have another story to tell. A story about housing and a story about the state and housing in the way that the state imagined what was the place that new Indian citizens are supposed to be living at. And I can tell it because I live it. I am that Indian citizen that was imagined. Yeah. So that's why I said I'll make a film on my building. Lovely villa. I live in LIC colony in Borivali West. How many of you all know it? Any of you know it? Yeah, but you live in Borivali. Where? You live in Daisar. It's a lovely colony. You should go. It's really quite beautiful. Yeah. Oh, sorry, it went back. Oh no, sorry. Nah. This is all. I'll skip all of this, right? Or maybe I won't. I'll talk about it anyway. Yeah. Or maybe I won't, because I've taken the story too far. So our nostalgia for the future, just to kind of cut back a little bit, I'll take the story forward. Nostalgia for the future was produced by this organization, whom you all have not heard of, but those of us with a little grayer hair might have heard of, right? This was an organization called Films Division. That was the propaganda wing of the government. So government used to make films. And these films were shown on television or before films on screen. So when you went for a film, Amitabh Bachchan ko dekhne gaya. Before Amitabh Bachchan comes on screen, you will see 15 minutes of this. Films like this. Right? These are names of all housing films. Oh no, these are the citizen films. All of these we can't see, no? It's okay. You read the names. All of them are trying to make us a better citizen. This is how you're supposed to be as an Indian citizen. Very interesting films. You can go online and watch them on their Films Division has a YouTube channel. They're really interesting. And actually Mukul does a great Films Division class. He knows the archive inside out. Yeah. Mukul's my partner. But he also made films on housing. So these then became references for nostalgia for the future. So when you watch nostalgia, if you do, you'll see lots of clips that actually come from these films. Yeah. But these are the 4 buildings of that are in nostalgia. I didn't know I had these slides, so I might as well tell you. Like that is the first one. Sorry, that the first one is the palace, Lakshmi Villas. The second one is the Shodhan Villa. The third one is Gandhi Ashram, and the fourth one is public housing in Delhi. But across all of this, we realized that every single one of this was housing projects or house projects done by very powerful people. Kings and emperors of our country were deciding as to how we are supposed to live. Yeah? And we realized that the voice of the people themselves was completely unheard. So an important house that is embedded across the whole film is the voice and the people who were supposed to be modernized. When Nehru is doing his big project, he's saying, "Arey modern ban na, modern ban, correct, modern ban, is tarah ban," and they're like, "To hota kaun hai?" Right? So it's a question that's there. So that's the fifth body. Especially at the end of the film, there's almost an eruption of this fifth body that questions everything that has happened earlier. If you see the film. Anyway, lovely villa is what we are here to talk about. Oops, sorry. Kya ho raha hai? Sorry, this is a little awkward to do it like that. Yeah. So this is my family. You all have seen all of this. I don't need to tell you. That's my father, my sister, my mother and me. On the terrace of we have a terrace. On the terrace of the apartment as I was growing up. Now, what is interesting about this colony was my father and my mother moved here in 1974. I was 3-4 years old when they moved in here. What is interesting is that this was a colony designed by the government. Life Insurance Corporation. But it wasn't a colony meant for people who work in LIC. There are 2 buildings meant for them, but the rest of them was all meant for people who have life insurance policies. So my parents bought a life insurance policy. And when they started paying back, premium bharna padta hai na, they kept paying their premiums. When the policy matured, unko ghar mila. This was an amazing scheme created by LIC at that time to give opportunities for middle class young people, possibilities of living in the city. But what that meant was really interesting. What that meant was that I received my house not because of the amount of money that I had. It depended on the policy I bought. Not on the religion I had. It depended on the policy I bought. Not on the caste, not on the language. So what happened is that mere building mein, you had people who had 1-bedroom apartments to 6-bedroom apartments. So you had people who were Sikhs, Muslims, Dalits, and people from all different languages in the city. And that was only possible because of the way that the houses were distributed. These kinds of schemes don't exist anymore. Our city today is completely subdivided into clans. This is the brochure that they saw. In the brochure that was there, they looked at it and said, "Hame na ye ghar chahiye." Right? And then they were allotted the home. Designed by Korea, right? You all know Charles, Korea. Right? And Korea is, of course, his interest in cross ventilation. That's the tube home. Even these apartments, even though they are apartment buildings, have a real interest in cross ventilation. That's the colony. That's Borivali Station. Utsav, your school is here. No, Utsav's not there. Utsav school is there. It's a large colony. It's got a ring road on all sides, right? And from that ring road, there are roads that come in. They end in dead ends. And in the middle of this entire thing is a large forest of mango trees. So mango trees everywhere, and if you look at this, each of these gullies, there'll be a gully, there'll be houses on both sides, and behind that there is green space. So this is a continuous green space. So I could actually walk all the way from here to that house only through green spaces, effectively through the forest. So no cars ran through the center. These were the ways in which the homes were imagined, like terraced housing. It wasn't built like this, but this is in the original brochure. These are the apartments. These are all images from the same brochure. You can see that there are some which are this tight and some that are sprawling apartments. Some have, on one side, the entire facade is flat, so those guys don't get terraces. On the other side, you get terraces that are stepping back. That's my house. Yeah. This is actually my house. Because what has happened is, People have added things, changed things over the years. After all, it's been what, 50 years since it was built? Yeah. So it has gone through its life cycles and changes. Most people really like living there. So we have not really had people, although they move out, they keep the house. People don't necessarily sell that much. This is my mother. Yeah. My father died in 2014. Okay. So since then, my mother's been living there by herself. I have moved out. I live in Borivali East. My sister now lives in Charco. So now this is, she lives with the ghosts of everyone in that house right now. Yeah. And in the film, they're really interested in the way that the house itself carries those ghosts. Ghosts of earlier configurations of furniture, new configurations of furniture, places that my father used to sit. His ghost, in some senses, continues to haunt there. One of the interesting things that we were interested about architecture is all architecture is haunted by future bodies and past bodies. My father was an engineer, came from Chennai. My mother's Marathi. My father came from Chennai. No relation. We have no relationships with my Tamilian part of the family. So there was always a sort of alienation and emptiness behind my father's history, and that was also an important thing for me to think about. By the film, there are also one-liners in the film that will refer to that very specifically, which you won't understand. Only I know that. So, if you've seen the film, you'll realize that there are 4 different voices within which the film is spoken. There's one which is a purely historical voice, which is usually Mukul, his voice, which will be like, the LIC colony was built at, big data voice, right? There's one voice that is there, that's that, right? The second voice is a description of things that are happening on the streets, like my mother walking somewhere, or, I'm watching something. Those were the times of Russian ballet dances. Those, everyday life, memory, that is done usually in my sisters and my voices. Right? Generally, we are talking to each other. Those are usually memory voices. And the third is like a sort of place where at the end, our voices collapse into each other. That entire portion called the primitive hut, if you all have seen. When screen goes black, you get a text called the primitive hut. And there's a sort of poem of sorts that is read over a collage of images. So there are 4 different voices through which we are speaking of homes in this whole, within the entire film. Right? You also realize that within the film, we use many different image formats. Sometimes it's video, sometimes it's film, sometimes it's still image, sometimes it's black and white. Because in each of those, there is a certain kind of emotional affect. When you see a sepia tint, or you guys use Instagram filters all the time, don't you? So Instagram filters do the same thing. Neon, so we wanted to play with the fact that everything is about memory. So everything is like, and we wanted to play with the texture of images within the film. Yeah? And the same thing with sound. If you look at the sound also, there's a lot of music, etc. within it. Each of it has a certain meaning for me, not necessarily for anyone else. It comes from my own history with that piece of music. Yeah? And they are close really. Some of it is directly sung by my mother and my singing teacher. Some of like that song Marathi, Mendi Cha Panavar. I don't know if you're Marathi, but there's a song. Lata Mangeshkar sings it in the film. That was written by my uncle. So, all of the pieces of music have some sort of personal relationship with the film. Yeah. And if there's one thing that ties the film together overall is this idea of the impossibility of architecture. Yeah. The idea is that architecture is always provision. Yeah. In the sense that architecture is a way in which we try to make sense of the world. But every time we try and make sense of the world, the world will change. Yeah? So architecture is always desperately trying to catch up, trying to make sense of things. And that's how the end also. The film treats architecture in a very, very complicated way. It treats architecture as the idea of organization. Organizing life, trying to make sense of it, organizing language. That's why the poetic end, where language itself disintegrates. So it's the architecture of language, the architecture of the nation, the architecture of the home, and the architecture of my own identity. and all of these are mirrored across each other, and all of them are always on the brink of disintegration. That is what the film attempts to, well, I don't know whether explicitly does, but it plays around with many of these ideas together in the film. I think that's all I'd like to say, or is there more? At this end. It's not Charlie Chaplin. It's Buster Keaton. It's an understandable error. No one knows Buster Keaton, which is amazing. Okay, now you all have questions. Comments. Did you all like the film or did you hate the film? Did you all not understand the film? Huh? You like the film? Good, I'm happy. Good. With the smoke. Yeah, I love that sequence. There was no Instagram. Obviously. So, okay, I'll tell you what that scene was about. Right? So, just before we go into that scene, there is a piece of music. Dun, 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 dun. This is a piece of music. Now, that piece of music is the opening of a major pop star, Madonna, the first bars of a big hit called Open Your Heart. Right? Now, this is like, I might as well tell you all of the various layers I was working with. So, Madonna is a kind of pop star whose image is always changing. She's always playing with images, right? So everything is about posing, and through posing, she changes her identity. Okay, so which is why I use that particular piece of music for the sequence where me and my friends are acting like really cool and posing on different places, right? Because it is really the way you become men. You become men by acting like men, no? There's this particular sort of aspiration, and young men do it all the time. Like, they act as if they're not vain, and I don't care how I look, but actually they care really deeply about the way they look. So we are really interested about that performativity. Like, how do you, adolescence and masculinity ka jo space hota hai na, ki how do you become a man? What is the idea of a man? And how do images, whether that's film images or photographic images, allow you to become that man? And since we wanted to say that this is not only something that happened a long time back, we inserted contemporary posers from Instagram into that particular sequence.
That guys created that thing because AI was not available at that time, right? So smoke bombs were used.
This was smoke bomb. This was just like 3 years, 4 years, 5. No, it so happened that we were shooting in LIC and we saw this young men do this. You're like, yeah, perfect. I was like, Acha, this amazing thing about documentaries, this is what happens when you're doing documentary. Because you're shooting and then suddenly something, arey, yaar, this can also happen. Like, I'm acting, when I'm explaining nostalgia for the future to you, I act as if it was all planned out. ऐसे कुछ नहीं था. क्या हुआ था? हम लोग को शोधन मिला का परमिशन मिला था. शोधन मिला में परमिशन देते नहीं. So they gave us 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. Okay. So we finished shooting for 2 hours in the morning. अभी करेंगे क्या? It's like, Gandhi Ashram. Gandhi. So then we go to Gandhi Ashram and then I pull it into the story of the film. It wasn't planned. We had only 3 houses earlier. Gandhi Ashram घुसाया मैंने. Because that happens, serendipity happens when you're doing documentary. Things happen that you don't expect. And that can be really nice to play with actually. Yes. So that became why that sequence came. The posing sequence. Yeah, this. So this is Buster Keaton. It's a film called 1 Week. It was made almost at that time exactly 100 years back. It's a film about a family, a couple who are trying to make a house. They buy a house, they build a house, but nature and all kinds of traumas and they're still trying to hold on to the house. Right? So for me, it was about actually that precarity and how every time you build something, it's precarious, it will collapse. But yet you constantly have to do it over and over again. Architecture, in other words, for me is an act that is always going to be in threat of being useless. But it's not something you can ever deny. It's like language, no? I can say that language is something that is keeping us in prison, but you need language. Without language, what do you do? And this is also where my real personal identity question comes in, right? Because as a gay man, questions of home and questions of house are always problematic because they assume a certain role I'm supposed to play in the world. Right? But I know that I need to destroy that home, but I also know I need a home. Without homes, you're left bereft, empty. So that's how that particular end, and that's how we show that breaking down 3 times at the end. Because it breaks down, you build it, you breaks down, you build it, breaks down, you build it. But it's also true that, very often when people watch Lovely Villa, they think I'm being sentimental about homes. Actually, I'm not. I'm being very critical about the idea of home. I'm saying that it's necessary. And it has memory, it has value, but it also has the ability to suppress who you are. Because what do homes do? They always imagine norms. This is what you're supposed to do. You are supposed to be this person, family, structure, daddy, mummy, grandmother, ye karo, wo karo, ye mat karo, ye mat. Sab hota hai na? So while that provides you comfort, it also encases you in certain kinds of behavior that may not be you. Freedom, in other words. And as a gay man, this is perpetual, right? Because when I was growing up, there was a certain idea that I have to get married, have a kid. My mother will be like, my grandmother will be like doesn't know how to deal with my partner. It's constantly there. And all comes from, because she wants the home to continue in perpetuity as a certain form. Sure. Yeah. That's a good question. I was thinking about the idea of like agency, like who is the one who makes the home? Who is the one who makes houses? Right? I think that will answer our question. Yeah? The home is often made. The home doesn't exist. Right? The home is created by relationships. It's created by things that you're doing. The question is who is doing it and why. If I'm doing it because my agency has been allowed to express itself in whatever form. Right? The house, in other words, is more of an infrastructural idea. It's a building project. I will give a roof, that's my house. Right? But homemaking has a very different sort of tonality. I feel like if you are able to kind of come back to, if you are able to manage homemaking as integral to housemaking, then you will be able to get some sort of idea as to how that line between the two can be blurred. There are people who have tried to do this. Many people have. Like you can look at sites and services schemes in Aranya. Doshi has tried it. That guy, what's his name? Aravina has tried it in Chile, wherever he has tried to do these half homes. Or even kind of big policies like the million, I think it's a million homes policy or something like that in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, that gave loans and technical expertise to women to build homes. Or Khuda Ki Basti in Pakistan, where there was a sites and services scheme basically. So we have to start thinking as to how do we engage with homemaking as an act of agency that belongs to the resident, and house, which is a set of infrastructure that the state can provide to make these homes. Yes. I would be happy if that was the way that we imagined housing today. Today, the state has decided it doesn't want to do housing. Today, the state has said, अरे builder करेगा. Now, why should the builder build public housing or housing for poor people? Right? The builder is not going to make a profit doing that. So effectively, you're asking a builder to make things that is like asking a lion to behave like a lamb. Never going to do that. And then we wonder as if housing, why is there no public housing? Why is there no affordable housing in the city? Because you have removed the responsibility of the state in providing public housing. The state had to take that responsibility. But we are removing the state's responsibility from education also, no? From health also, with housing also. Privatization of everything is, it's easy because you're catering to the private motives of all kinds of investors. But that is not necessarily towards the poorest of the poor, na? Which is why maybe nostalgia for the future came out of there. Sorry? Lorry, yeah. So Mr. Baker was trying something interesting. What Mr. Baker was trying to do, he was trying to invent a vernacular. He was trying to invent a system that could be used by people to build their homes. He wasn't really interested in my architectural authorship. He was interested in systemic, like a vernacular, like तू भी कर सकती, मैंने system develop किया, तू भी use करना, please use कर. He wasn't necessarily saying कि नहीं मेरा है, मेरा stamp है, मुझे 10% दे दो.
So there's a curious question. How would it just be thought? How could Laurie Baker think such things? Like during his 5 years degree in architecture.
He didn't do. I don't think he did also 5 years degree. Was he an architect trained? I don't think he was trained as an architect.
So how? What is your point?
The contractor also wasn't trained as an architect.
How sensitivity came into that?
By being human. I mean, you know, that's the thing. No, really, no. It's a good question because oftentimes वो होता है. As architects, we forget our responsibilities as human beings.
Because now with this lectures and everything, we are getting to be exposed to that side of architecture. Before that time, it's impossible to think them having these lectures and being able to have their sensitive side open towards architecture and all.
देखो मैं simple बोल रहा हूँ ना. देखिए हम architect. It's a simple, actually a very very simple thing. Why should anyone do architecture at all? क्यों बनाते हैं building? क्यों बनाते हैं building?
Provide housing.
That is what you do. But why do you provide? Why do you make housing? Requirement. अरे बहुत, everyone is living. What is requirement also? To build, simply put, no. You cannot do architecture unless you have hope that if I do something, something is going to become better. Otherwise, why do architecture? Why waste the resources of the planet in making things unless you do, if it's not going to make things better? Like that is true. You all think architecture should make things better? Yeah. Okay. Now, good question. What is better? People's emotions, connecting people's emotions. Why? Why is it important that people's emotions are connected to structures?
They will be the one deciding.
Okay, but why is it important? What are the value systems? I'm asking a very simple question. What are the value systems that you think a society is built on? When we're saying better, na? All societies are built on certain value systems. Ancient Roman civilizations were built on certain ideas of what was called good society, right? And anything that they did was to cater to that good society image. Okay? Or whatever, you can do this forever, right? I'm saying very simply, we are here today. 2025 India. What is better in India now? What are the value systems upon which a society is built? Sorry?
No discrimination of the gender, of religion, of caste, and whatever as a society. This is what I feel like it makes it better.
My dear boy, what's your name?
Shoaib.
Shoaib. Absolutely, right? But that's one aspect of it. And it's not something that you believe. It's something we all have to believe. Why do we all have to believe that, Shoaib? because it is why we are Indian citizens. Right? If you claim to be an Indian citizen, you have to believe that because it is in the document that tells you that you're Indian. Right now? So when you say better, anything that you do should make our life less. We should try and build a world that I've just described. Non-discriminatory world. Right now? That can be an axis where you can decide, okay, this is not discriminatory, therefore it is good. Can you say that? Where else? What are the other factors? Don't have to think too much actually. If you all claim to be Indian citizens, this has to be deeply embedded in everything that you do. It's there in the first page of the Constitution. It says freedom, equality, justice and fraternity. What is fraternity? Fraternity is my favorite. Freedom is understandable, we all should be free. Does your architecture make people more free? If it doesn't, shit architecture. Right? Is your architecture socially just? If it's not, shit architecture. Is it environmentally just? Okay. I'm asking. What's the third one? Justice, environmental equality. Does your architecture deal with, that's actually Shoaib's direct point, right? Does it treat everyone fairly, equally? Is it trying to make the world more equal? I'm not saying it will. Even though the preamble doesn't say that we are going to, the preamble says that we are going to try and make the world more free. It's not saying that it is. Yeah. But fraternity is my favorite. What is fraternity? Brotherhood. What is brotherhood? क्या है brotherhood क्या है? Why do I say तू मेरा भाई है यार? It's love, no? It's love. Right? So fundamental to your damn constitution and the fact that you're all claiming to be Indian is love. And when you do something for people you love, you're giving them gifts, which is why, to answer your first, what you said, so that they are able to feel more comfortable because you love them. They're gifts that you're giving people you love. It's a gift. Right? It's a service. So, if those are the parameters by which we decide what is good architecture, then we can think about what is a good practice of architecture. Without a parameter to decide what is good, if you're going to say good architecture is that which is published in international magazines, then I'm like, really? What's so good about it? Good architecture is one that has new form, dynamic form. I'm like, why is dynamic form better? Because dynamic form has no value, no, fundamentally. It's just a shape. Is the dynamic form making me feel exhilarated because it's a gift given to me? Then I can understand. But form by itself has no meaning.
So the world filled with architects like Lori Bucher and Charles Korea will be the best.
I don't know about that. Because the thing is this, right? There's always a contradiction in these blanket statements and the question of freedom and equality. Yeah. Because at one level, you want everyone in a democratic space to be able to voice who they are. And at the same time, we want to also say that, nahi, ek hi hona chahiye, aise bhi ho sakta na. The only way we can work with this, which is why everything has to be in flux and in dynamic. Everything has to be in conversations. The democratic is always hinged upon the fact that we can work things out if we talk to each other. We have to believe in that everyone has an equal voice and an equal agency to participate in a conversation. And I'll bring my value system, you bring your value, so let's trash it out, argue it out. That is what the democratic is meant to be. Now, when you vote for somebody, you're voting for it based upon the arguments that they're making. You're not voting on somebody, hopefully, because of the way they look on Instagram. Hopefully. Yeah, sure.
One of the lectures on housing, that's misconsidered in our city. Right? There are more of slums, and I belong to that particular region as well. So, thing is, it has been more commodity. I've been told in lecture that some speaker was there, I don't know his name, but he was talking more about housing in a way that there are people who are living here with that peace of mind in a particular place that they all are living in, and they all are making a society. They all are making education out of it, and the hospitality services as well. And on the other hand, contradictory to it, there are buildings which are restoring bigger families, like more richer families. So, what are your views on that particular thing? That what should be the consideration of making Mumbai a more dynamic or more richer or more luxurious buildings or with more fantasizing things, or it should be as it is right now?
I don't think it should be as it is right now because it sucks. It's not a nice city to live in. I mean, it's a difficult city to live in. It doesn't provide you ease of access to lots of things, no matter where you are, which class you belong to. The first thing I would like to say is that I don't think slums should be treated as not housing. Yeah, I think we should think about informal settlements and processes as also housing processes, and sometimes maybe homemaking processes that are vital and central to providing places for people to fulfill themselves. Yeah, I was thinking about this for a while now. Just what you're saying. What is a good city? This is like, what is a good city? Yeah, and oftentimes we are fed this myth that a good city is one that has clean roads and big whatever chakachak jo dikhne wala hai, wo good city hai. Maybe that's one kind of good city. But what is a good city in India? What is the role of a good city in India? That's a question, na? Because city is also finally a tool towards the making of better society. So if as much as my computer is a tool or my iPhone is a tool by which I communicate, the city is also a tool that provides possibilities for many people to fulfill their destinies. If I change the way in which I think of what a good city is, if I imagine that a good city is one that has provided the most number of opportunities for people to get education, health, and homes, for those who have absolutely no property in rural Maharashtra or rural Bihar, then Bombay is a great city, man. It's fantastic. And maybe the slum is really central to that imagination, which the apartment will just never be able to do. However, that doesn't mean that the slum is this lovely, beautiful place that we need to romanticize. It's not. Right? It doesn't have water, it doesn't have infrastructure, it doesn't have light and ventilation. Right? Where people are always living in precarious conditions, always worried about them being evicted, always worried about a developer coming and saying, that we need to get you out and make a new, so you're living in precarious times. Right? So our difficulty is there. What we need, Nashwar, is a new imagination of what value systems we have to be able to understand both homes as well as housing, or even what a good city is. Yeah, you are right now 22, 23 years old. 22 years old, right? So you will now go out into the world, and it's really your responsibility to change people's minds, and also, Shoaib, perhaps develop new kinds of practices entirely that don't fall into these categories. Like when Mr. Baker was developing his firm, he wasn't working with a preset model about this is how practice should be. We invented a new mode, of working. And there can be new modes of working. Right? There are friends of mine called Herbs. They work in Dharavi. They've been trying to work with slum improvement as a way of thinking about communities rather than slum demolition or redevelopment. They make these really interesting images. They made one that says Dharavi Kanatizova, something like that it's called. What they do is that they take images of Dharavi, okay, and they take images of communities in Tokyo, possibly one of the richest cities on the planet. And what they do, they take half of one and half of the other and they splice it together, and you can't make out the difference. Yeah? Because the processes that have led, you can see them, they are online. Yeah, they are trying to make an argument that says that we can imagine a city that is low rise, high density with great infrastructure. Why do we only imagine housing as the apartment type? That's the argument they are making. They're saying that architectural interventions need not be erase and build a new building. Architectural interventions can be just this. Let's design a new way for the sewage pipeline to reach every home or a tap. So there are people who are trying these out, but unfortunately, the way that the real estate market works in the city, these kinds of models are not given any, because they don't make value out of land. One thing we have to understand is that in Bombay, people's lives do not matter. I'm being very honest with you. Okay, what matters is that the life is now reduced down to a number that can be sold on the market. That's how slum communities are seen. They are seen as numbers. Now, very bluntly, as areas with certain kinds of regulations on them, FSI itna mil sakta hai. This is not only relegated to the developer lobby or the political lobbies. Even slum dwellers themselves see themselves as commodities. हमारा land का इतना property मिलता है, हमें इतना क्यों मिलता है? समझ रहे हो ना? They are not interested in the future possibilities of family. This is only it's a commodity that can be traded upon. That's the truth of the matter. So how do you balance? So you can't even deny them, because after all, it'd be ridiculous to deny them their rights. So how do you find the balance between these things? Those are the sorts of questions that there are no easy answers, my friend. If there were easy answers, we would be not living in the city that we are. Sure. Yeah. Lovely Villa you haven't seen? No. Nostalgia. Ah.
How do you see the idea of transforming into organic where equality and migration constantly reshape the domestic space? And another part is, can homes in such a fixed, or must they also be fluid performing and negotiations?
So this is, I think, this is part of this exactly, this to kind of come back to Shoaib's sort of point. I think it's a similar sort of question, right? In terms of the way that we think of house and home ka separation. Is we always imagine the house, as we were talking a little bit earlier, that a house is an infrastructure project. The home is not an infrastructure project. The home is a dynamic process of making, identities, identifying, process of making. The big issue has been now that the house and housing have been so conflated with each other, right? So in the mass production of housing, house has become purely an infrastructural project. Now less even a physical infrastructure, more as a financial infrastructure project. Right? So if we are able to now think about what you were saying, that the dynamics of people's lives, like narrative, in other words, stories through which people do make community, make life, make bada pav stalls so that they can sell things and incorporate. There's a dynamics to that. The real trick here, Utsav, I feel, is for us to break that boundary between infrastructure, which is house. Can there be a dynamic way in which we imagine house infrastructure? House as infrastructure. That is really where the question comes up. Sorry? There were models like that. For example, sites and services schemes that you find all over the city. You find them in Charkop, in Andheri. You find them in Gorai, New Bombay. There were also slum improvement schemes that were there. What happened is, as soon as land becomes a commodity for the open market, we don't do those anymore. There's no land that is set aside to say that this is place for low-income house. We don't do that anymore. Everything has become the default apartment type, because those apartment types can create profit margins of incredible sizes for developers.
The question stays in my mind, like it's either going to be a commodity, or the rest of might be in the future, or might get a change in the perspective of the people thinking about the slums, or like the people living in slums. Might be a change in the society.
But the society is who else but us only, na? Finally, what is society? It doesn't exist out there, no? Finally, it's us only. Like, and then, no, and it's also not so hopeless. There are many communities that have done this. There are many architects who've tried to work with this, right? And it is something that that is the struggle that we have to have with और कोई Oh, Haaris has what? You have a lot to say about kineticity? Tell me now. I think that there is a southern urbanism, romanticism to the way he imagines. There's a certain way in which cities of the south, global south, are imagined as these perpetually dynamic things that are shifting and changing, which is true, but there are many, like, I don't think he understands the political lens of this much. He sees it purely as a formal, like a formal way. He sees it as it's shift, it's still and it's changing, right? That's what the effective argument is, that staticity, kineticity. But I don't think it's going deeper to understand the processes behind which this happens, why they happen, and the kineticity is also not necessarily one that is without politics, claim making, all of these things. So I feel like it's a little like it's a first stab at an argument. I think it needs to be elaborated much more. The Kumela work is really good, but the hawkers in Bombay and all is good. आप पिक्चर के बारे में पूछो, ये म्यूजिक क्यों यूज किया, कुछ तो है. While they were actually watching them, they were playing with their Instagram accounts actually. Truth. हाँ बोल सोएब.
From one particular scene to go into a different particular scene, but giving it to a transition. So what means it was very much natural. Felt like you were there into that particular space and imagining things like the activities which were happening, and not the sudden, but through that particular space or like through the activities you were going out of that particular.
That was my. वो मेरा एडिटर था. नहीं, क्या मैं सच बोलूं तुझे, मैं जब फिल्म बनाई थी ना, तो मैंने पूरे फिल्म को एक्चुअली एपिसोड्स में डिवाइड किया था. तो मैंने क्या किया था कि, और एपिसोड के टाइटल्स भी थे, तो एकदम ऐसे टक 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 करके ऐसे 10 ऐसे एपिसोड बनाए थे, ठीक है. और जब पहला कट जब बिरखम ने किया था, तो एपिसोडिक कट था पूरा, और वो पूरा जो एंड था ना, प्रिमिटिव हट, वो तो था ही नहीं. वो प्रिमिटिव हट की कहानी बताता हूँ तुम लोगों को. हाँ, वो एंड हो रहा था वैसे, वो कुछ जनरली कुछ हो रहा था, और मैं बहुत नाखुश था. आई वाज लाइक, यार बहुत पकाऊ हुआ है. नो, सो फर्स्ट थिंग रिकव सेड, लेट्स रिमूव द इंटरटाइटल्स. सो वो निकाल दिया, एंड देन ही जस्ट स्मूदन ईच ऑफ देम. वो स्किल होती है दोस्त, वो मेरी नहीं है, उसकी है. And then I was really unhappy with the end of the film, because I was like, it didn't, and then I remembered that, okay, this is personal, but I'll tell you guys, huh? So the day after my father died, I remember sitting in the bedroom. Mukul and I lived together in one apartment in Borivali East. So I was sleeping in the bedroom in the afternoon because I hadn't gone to work. And I woke up at around 3 o'clock, kind of half, and I saw my father beside me. The ghost of my father, you may call it. And I remember him talking to me. Obviously, it wasn't there, but maybe it was a trick of my mind or something. But like there was some sort of conversation that happened. And I remember coming out and telling Mukul, like, just met my father. And he was like, we were both like, he didn't know how to react to that. He didn't want to hurt my feelings. But I found it little like half funny, half sad, moving, that weird thing. And I needed to get it out of my system. So I immediately after had a coffee and then I went to my computer and within half an hour I churned out a text. I wrote. It was called The Primitive Hut. Okay. And then I wrote one thing, long thing. Okay. So when I was really unhappy with the film, which is around 5 years later, I was like, yaar, that text is damn good, yeah. Okay, I think we should use it. So I bring the text and I tell Mukul, we're going to use this to end. Mukul's like, how can you do that? It's too personal. I was like, मैंने लिख लिया, खत्म हो गया. Now we can use it. I had distance from that text, right? The text no longer had the resonance then. It became pure material, like form. Like something to be used. Huh? So let's use it. And then then he read it. He said, no, you're not using it. I gave it to 2 other people. They said, don't use it. I was like, no, I'm using this for certain. So then I sat and I removed little bits of it. My sister came up with the idea that let's do it like a reading that is done as a sort of dance between me and her as we are reading. So we did the reading and then we had to edit it. Abhi editing mein, wo Rikhav to super editor. So with some help, he just edited the whole thing. But I insisted that he used, I don't know whether you remember from the film, there's a photograph, black and white, of my father in the hospital bed before he died. In the film, right? And I said, we are using this. And because this is one thing I will not allow you to use. You cannot expose yourself so much. It's too personal, this, that. And I was like, actually for me, it was just material. But I used it, right? And then the film got done and whatever. And then I realized what that damn film was. Yeah. Because my father, after my father died, we don't come from a religious family at all. Like, होता ही नहीं हमारे घर में कुछ. हाँ, like zero होता है. ठीक है. तो हमारे घर पे जो पोस्ट डेथ का जो रिचुअल्स होता है वो हुए ही नहीं थे. कुछ नहीं किए थे. Directly I went to work literally the day after. Actually I came to Virar for a jury the next day. But what happens because of that is that you're left with like this, like closure नहीं होता. तो मैंने बाद में जब when the film was done and after I showed it for the first time I realized that actually ये मेरा ritual था. फिल्म बनाना, ये डालना, ये सब खत्म करना, मेरा ritual था to be able to do closure on the film. So that's how the end came out. तो पूरा end जो है ना ऐसे. उसमें सब ये lines है जो किसी को नहीं समझेंगे. On the swing, the 3 of us sit and lie through our teeth for a promise he made to himself and did not keep. ऐसे line है. किसी को मालूम नहीं है क्या है, सिर्फ मुझे मालूम कि exactly मैं क्या refer कर रहा हूँ. Sometimes poetry works like that, no? Poetry works not by explaining. Poetry works by opening something, some strange door that you don't know where it's leading to. And then you can enter that door. Yes.
We talk about our sense and enabling design. Till 3 weeks, I've been imagining how my housing will look. So I've imagined it, futuristic.
What is your name? Anushka. Huh.
So till now, I had an image how my housing will look. So the balconies of each flat having a own, vegetation and giving terraces to each high-rise buildings.
It will be. It's okay. Nothing wrong with high rises.
After, all these sessions, I'm thinking, now an idea came to with individual housing and after studying Japan, Tokyo and
Try kar, it's really tough.
So, my question is, do you imagine a futuristic AI visual type of buildings or
देखो AI क्या है ना, AI is like a AI में बहुत people act that AI सब कुछ बदलने वाला है. AI क्या है? AI is a tool. Okay, like a hammer is a tool. Okay, I can use a hammer to hang a picture on a wall. I can use a hammer to hit somebody on the head and kill them. It's just a tool. AI is just that. AI itself has no value. It's how you use AI that is the question. So everyone like AI सब कुछ like क्या बदलने वाला है? Finally, it's about how you use it. No? And there's nothing wrong with AI. Please use AI, but because it's about what you do with it, it's not about itself. It's like saying this hammer is very, very, very holy. How is the hammer holy? It has nothing. No.
For the cities that AI shows us it's very promising.
ठीक है, दिखा दिया तो क्या हुआ? हाँ. Yes. पहले तो सर तो मुझे कोई नहीं बुलाता, पता है तुझे? मेरे स्टूडेंट्स नहीं बुलाते, तो आप मुझे सर बुलाओगे तो मैं यहाँ देखता हूँ ये कौन मेरे पीछे है.
Partially, हमने देखा कि different spaces में पूरा autobiography जैसे का सारे moments emotional, sentimental, different festivals, some celebrations, so context, so full आए, full में जैसे सब partially जैसे आप देखते हो, हमने तो मूवी में देखा, but as a जो आपका home था, तो जैसे throughout the years, अगर हमारे स्टेडिंग अगर लीड करते हैं, तो जब spaces wise प्रोजेक्ट देखते हैं, तो going beyond spatial, वो कैसे देखते हैं?
देखो पहले तो ना मैं सोच रहा हूँ कि ये स्पेस होता क्या है, ठीक है? कि स्पेस हम एक है थियरिस्ट है ऑनरी लेफेव्रे करके, ठीक है, फ्रेंच गाय, and he had this funda that space doesn't exist, space is always produced, ठीक है? And he says space is produced in three ways. Okay? One is produced in the mind, like you imagine space is there, he called it conceived space. The second he says is he calls it perceived space, a space that we make, like this room, that's a space, drawn, built, right? And the third he says lived space, okay, space that is produced by bodies that are using, like look at the way that this is being used right now. It's not being used the way this room was designed. It's used in a completely different way because these guys have gathered together differently. So it's what he would call lived space. I think especially when you're doing housing, if you start, and lived space is always narrative, stories. She gathered here and sat with her, no, like there's a whole story with it. One of the ways that I like to think of architecture is less in terms of the conceived, but rather the lived. If I start thinking that architecture, if we think about the home, not as like this is the bedroom, but think about it as the place that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the 17-year-old girl closed the door and checked the phone for messages from her boyfriend. Okay, that is a story that you're telling. No? Now think about the space that would be appropriate for that story. If we start thinking about use and activity rather than category, yeah, I think it may just change the way we think of housing. Because otherwise in housing, all bedrooms will have that double bed and वो कपाट होता है इस पे और वो desk होता है, right? ना? Now how many times I have that same configuration in my bedroom? Double bed, desk. Now, how many times have I actually never used the damn desk for what the desk was meant for? The desk is used as a place for me to watch TV. I don't sit on it and work. It's interesting more to think about the bodies themselves that are going to inhabit the spaces and think about architecture that caters to that, I feel, rather than simple allocations. Once we had done a design project like that in Chakrata. We were in Chakrata, which is near the foothills of the Himalayas. And we did some measure drawings and things like that. And the way we designed our design project was I sat on the terrace early in the morning and I wrote 180 short stories. All of them are one-line stories, one-sentence stories. And the students were asked to make a building where these things would happen. One of them was, for example, The backpackers from Pune sat on the terrace sipping Italian coffee, debating the relative merits of Asha Bhosle and Lata Mangeshkar. This was one story. And the students had to imagine what would this be the space that would house them. So it's nice to kind of change the way we think about what are we really doing. Are we making rooms or are we making spaces for people to live? They have stories too.
Yeah, so that's what the animal story like if there's a refugee, migrant, refugee can't go like that. Then we need stories.
Yeah. If you think about what stories allow you to do, stories are incredible things, Utsav, because they allow you to live another life.
What is the idea that you architects to take it forward?
I would say one of the important things for us to know is people. So engaging with communities, speaking to them, listening to them, empathizing with them is key. Only then will we be able to move away from architecture as object into architecture as space, as spatial practices. We have come to a time, Utsav, with the climate crisis especially, that architecture itself, because it is itself so kind of extractive on resources, that architecture itself has to rethink what its scope is. It's no longer the making of buildings, it has to be about the making of spatial opportunities. All right. Thank you all. No? Okay, thank you guys. If you want to contact me, Utsav has my number, and I am easily found on Instagram. An Architect. ANARCHY. Thank you.